This is Robert Stark. I'm here with Pilleater. We're going to be discussing Pilleater's new novella, Trip. Pilleater, great having you on.
It's nice talking to you, Robert.
So, Trip is your first novella. It's about a road trip, but it deals with a lot of your favorite themes and things we talk about on this show.
Yeah, originally, there's actually two books, and the first book was a short story collection of all my documents from the past 6 years. And
that's the one, Almond Eyes, Babyface.
Yeah, and in that book, I had a story along with it, and some of the characters that are in Trip also appear in Almond Eyes, Babyface, and what I decided to do instead of put it in that collection was to separate it and actually have two books now. There's my short story collection, Almond Eyes, Babyface, and there's the long story called Novella. And I think of the short story collection, Almond Eyes, Babyface, as being a companion or a metatext to Trip. And both are important. I think both of them as separate releases and both as good fictional pieces. But for a name like Trip, I was actually really influenced from an album by Cause and Effect called Trip. They were kind of like this Depeche Mode knockoff band from like 94, early 90s. And the Trip album is really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of play with that playful music of that early 90s and thought it would be cool to use it as a title the same way Murakami uses Norwegian Wood for his own novel, Norwegian Wood. So, and it could be about a car trip, but I made sure not to use the word trip in the novella at all, which I thought was interesting, because trip can mean many things, from a car trip to a trip in a dream, a drug trip, or just you as the reader going on a trip.
And yeah, and it addresses all of those things.
Uh-huh.
So you start the book off with quotes from different people. There's a one by there's a quote by Brandon Adamson, and he says basically this book is Elliot Rodger if he turned his life together and stuck with Asian chicks. That's what he said. That's how he described you. Or said the book or you?
It said me. That's about me. And,
okay.
And that's kind of funny because the writer, or at least the artist, could be a maniac like Elliot Rodgers, possible school shooter, but kind of reforms and becomes this, the artist, right? And
you're talking about the main character, Tom DeLonge.
No, I'm talking about myself.
But yeah, the character is basically based on you. You're admitting that. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think Tom is maybe an ego or a different perception of my own reality. I don't think it's me. It's certainly a different, like Slim Shady is to Eminem, right? It's this alter ego character. It's not really me as a person, but it represents some personalities. I would say that, but.
So Tom lives in Philadelphia. He's taking a road trip across country. He stops in Arizona. Then he ends up in Santa Barbara in California. And Tom, he's a stand-up comic, but he's also written some Asian erotica book.
Yeah, Oriental Girls.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
Which is kind of funny because I also have a companion text called Almond Eyes, Babyface, and in a way Tom has his own book, which he's known for in his own world, which is kind of an internet celebrity for his book called Oriental Girls, which states his own version of Asianarianism, and he is the inventor of Asianarianism in this book. So, back to the whole auto-memoir stuff, it is like Philip K. Dick's Valis in a way where it becomes a science fiction story kind of about yourself, but not really about yourself, It's, once again, an alter ego, but he uses that as his comedy, his stand-up comedy, and most of his jokes include being racial against, Asians, calling them gooks and slit-eye and stupid, There's a lot of race play between him.
Oh, I was going to say that. Well, there is a lot of race play in the book. Like him and his girlfriend, Daisy, they go back and forth, and is like, yeah, like, you want my white power cock, and then he calls her like, and then he like calls her stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a very interesting dynamic there. I mean, the book opens up by telling that your girlfriend is Chinese and you don't know how to fucking drive on the highway, and so you make fun of her because she's a bad driver. And it becomes playful. It's not that like you're racist or you hate the other race. It's this way of understanding differences and a way to actually find connection. It becomes where the bitchy attitude, it's funny, and I do think guys and girls like doing that to each other, even if it is of different races, and it's definitely something that be connected together. I mean, in a hype.
It's funny because I think it was Showtime. I forget the name of the show, but there's a sex show. They did a special on race play, but they went out of their way to be kind of hypersensitive and politically correct about it. Like, there was a black woman and a white man, and they would do these race plays. Like, he would be like a slave owner and dominate her, and then she would dominate him, and they would go back and forth. But they went into these like therapeutic sessions explaining like the deep, intense like sensitivities behind it. So like they do this intense race play, but they have to have this like sensitivity as like a counterbalance to it on these like
Exactly.
degenerate late night shows.
It seems like, in our liberal society, that it's okay when Sarah Silverman does some kind of race play or mocks races, but it's not okay if you're a white guy doing it.
Well, Sarah Silverman, I think she got in trouble for saying the word chink once.
Well, that's chink. It wasn't a nigger.
Oh yeah, her bit was like she was joking. She could say chink because she would get beaten up if she said the other word.
Yeah, that's how cowardly it is, right? But it just shows you that you can't be, they hate you if you're white, and so it's kind of futile. It's like, I think race play is basically the secret thing in our liberal society that everyone does in their private lives under the bed, and all the multiracial couples do. It's a way to liberate racism, really.
I like the reference that you put in there to Harriet Sugar Cookie.
Yeah, because I think she's really I think she's personally sexy too. Her being. There's a lot of other Asian porn actresses too, not just her. I mean, I just picked a name out of a bag. I thought, she needs a name drop, but
because she's not that famous, really. She's fairly avant-garde.
Yeah, exactly. And so you want to give respect to lesser names, and it's just I respect what Sugar Cookie does. She's doing this weird thing on her whole website where she's talking about like game culture, politics, and she does porn, right? She's making porn this normative thing where it's like, I can do all this and I can do porn. That's, I think, is very powerful, and like you said, avant-garde. It's really alt porn in a way. We can respect her as an intellect and as a beautiful Valkyrie maiden, an Asian Aryan Valkyrie maiden of some sort. And in the book, I also referenced to Franny Choi. Franny Choi was the
yeah, from the one she was the Korean girl who like has that picture. Sit there and let me abolish you.
Yeah,
and like she's like this SJW, but the joke in the book is like you could interpret it as this like race play sexual thing.
That too, and that the character Daisy, she has her book and she likes her poetry, and actually some of her poetry is quite funny because she has one poem about Lil Wayne's rap song, and she makes a quote-unquote feminist version of it. But really, it sounds like this artsy-fartsy thing she's doing, but really it looks like the evidence is showing that Franny could be a possible closet Asian Aryan, right? They say that like if you're gay, you should be a closet gay and not admit it. I think there's a lot of Asian Americans that pretty much love white people and want to be around the whole yellow feminist phenomenon. They love white culture and fun stuff like that, but they're too afraid to admit it because they don't have the words and means, because liberal society tells you can't do that. And yeah, it's funny because both Tom and Daisy are very very resistant punks that just don't care, and they know they're the center of the world and they'll do what they want, break in a hotel, have fun, annoy people. Who cares? We're both the fucking Asian Aryan people that no one gives a shit about, right? And they're just pissing off everyone.
why did you choose to explicitly say the word Asian Aryan in the book rather than just sort of playing off the theme and being less explicit, being
Well,
more implicit?
well, Tom wrote it in Oriental Girls. Tom invented that word. He told it about Daisy, and Daisy likes that, and so it's itself a fictional term in the book. It's not like he made up, and then that's what his brand name is, and people love it. And when he's doing stand up in the first venue, everyone's all like, "Heil Hitler, white power," and basically doing these Nazi jokes while admiring Asian girls at the same, Asian culture at the same time, and you get this strange dynamic between the two.
Who would you say is the target audience for the book?
Well, I think people who really like nine-banded books or Feral House, or people who've been reading countercurrent books. They like fringe reads, the classic Lulu print-on-demand, secret Stamazdat publishing stuff. You find a fiction that's alt-left or alt-lit, like Sam Pink and Cameron Pierce. He's kind of hip, kind of look at this cool guy who's just saying.
Are you in the
stuff.
book? You keep saying alt-twee.
Well, that's Turtle's term. Turtle made up alt-twee. That is a fictional world, and he's known for his book Dada Communism, right? And that sounds very familiar to another.
Yeah, beatnik fascism.
Right, Random Adamson, yeah. So in that world, alt-twee is a thing, but in our world, it's not really a thing. It shows you again. There is this strange internet culture that.
Well, Dada Communism wasn't that. I remember Konstantin von Hofmeister was playing with that whole thing. National Dadaism was kind of a mixture of both.
I'm only translating my consciousness. I don't know how Dada Communism would look like in poetry form by Turtle, so I wouldn't know.
But Turtle, how does he come about? He's referenced fairly brief. He's a fairly minor character.
He's super minor. He only appears in 10, 11, and 12, and you could say he is pretty much a cool kind of guy, and he just loves to talk about things, and he's just laid back, and he loves all that stuff, And
then you have a character named Howard Fessler, he's a photographer who lives in Santa Barbara, and apparently that character is based on Robert Stark.
Yes, and he also loves blonde Jewish women too, and he's all for Israeli Aryanism. He made that up.
Oh, Howard Fessler came up with the whole concept. That makes sense.
Robert Stark didn't. Howard made it up, and he was quite influenced by Tom's own Asian Aryanism, and he just loves taking pictures of all, of everything. He loves architecture, and it's kind of the person that made Tom's career go off, actually.
So he's a successful photographer. He's not he's not a struggling, depressed artist.
Yeah, he's living in Santa Barbara, and he's.
Oh, so he's the one who has that. You said space age house, because I was thinking of the whole. I was thinking of sort of Rabbit's alt left.
Yeah. Rabbit's alt left is different, especially from Turtle's alt twee. So it's kind of very weird, and it's a different alternate universe, kind of like the Star Trek of the two different worlds. So you have to really think about that in terms. They're only in Santa Barbara, walking down the restaurant of Johnny Clams. They'll be looking at people. They'll only be sometimes in Jake's house, and maybe be on the beach together, him and Daisy. But it's and they'll also be in the car and spotting out all the different people in Santa Barbara. So it is kind of like a memoir itself about the place.
How are you able to write about Santa Barbara if you've never been there? How descriptive did you get?
Well, that's the joy of being an artist, especially. That's a challenge right there. Think about all the European guys who've never been to China and wrote a complete list of Oriental fiction that's classical. It's always been fascination, through Xanadu. Well,
I noticed you mentioned Lombard Street in San Francisco. You got them totally mixed up. Santa Barbara is pretty far from San Francisco.
Well, I mentioned it's like Lombardo Street. I think there's Lombardo Street is the curve that goes down. So Jake's house is on the same street that looks like kind of like Lombardo Street that goes down, and it kind of gives that hilly impression, like you're going to go skateboarding down on it, and it gives you that hilly
Yeah,
atmosphere.
I mean, San Francisco is a lot more urban, but there are places in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is a hilly, like mountain area right along the coast, so I could see. I mean, I could kind of picture where he lives, like a wealthy photographer living in a mid-century modern home up in the hills somewhere around here. I could see that.
Yeah, I guess Jake's house is like a kitchen and a living room at the bottom and a bedroom up there with a
Wait,
porch.
who's Jake?
Jake is he's the other friend that Tom met online, and he's kind of
So
a
he
mysterious
doesn't.
guy.
He lives in Santa Barbara, or he brings him along.
He lives in Santa Barbara, and he tells Tom to go out there with him and see him, and he's very mysterious too, as he himself has another Asian girlfriend by the name of Nancy, who later Nancy meets Tom and Daisy when they're.
And she's the one who's Japanese.
Oh yeah. There's Daisy's Chinese and Nancy's Japanese. Yep.
Who was the one? What was the scene where the guy, one of the Asian girls, makes the guy, forces him to pull down his pants and jerks him off, and then makes fun of his like hairy bush? Was that Tom or?
That's Tom. That's Tom. That's Nancy just jerking him off because they're so close and they're like they just got done, like a game of Cosmic Encounter.
Oh yeah, you put all these show references like Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah, and doing drugs and young people stuff. If you're in a proximity of like a girl you don't know and you're in that scene, it's like anything can happen. So it's like if Nancy jerks him off, it's like who cares? It's not like it's cuckery or anything. It's just fun, and that's what he does to Tom. He gives him a hand job.
But there's an awkwardness to it.
It's awkward as he's with Daisy, but Daisy's kind of passed out downstairs, and I guess it's like the thrill of the.
Oh, he's cheating on her with Nancy. Gives him the hand job, and he's cheating on her with Daisy. Yeah.
Yeah, you could consider that cheating. If you're a strong man about it and be like, I can't do this, but it's like you're in the moment and it becomes, I guess Tom feels guilty the next day about it. But Nancy's a pretty bad girl. You got to watch out what she does. So.
Do you play off the Chinese versus Japanese stereotypes?
Well, the Chinese is, the Chinese is definitely more loyal to Tom, while we have this Americanized Japanese who's just basically a slut that just wants to be with guys, pill popper, whatever. But they're both thrilling, they're both exciting, and Tom can get with them both, and so it becomes this thrilling thing, I don't know, yeah, I do mess with that, so.
And the dream sequences are interesting. Like there's the one where he goes into an airport. And then the airport like turns into like a tropical rainforest, and then he starts like ejaculating onto I think it's Daisy but just is like his penis becomes like this like laser beam or something.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like based on my own dreams. It's visions I see, and kind of like this weird abstractness, like a Salvador Dali painting, where it's like your dick becomes a gun. You start shooting sperm at girls, and it just becomes thrilling, and it's kind of a real subconscious thing, right? It's a real dream like you could have. It's something also important too, like an airport, and you leave and you go and you're chasing after a girl, but you really can never get that girl. But at the same time, these dreams
like
are
in
real.
all those like cheesy romantic comedies, there's always this scene where the guy rushes to the airport to meet the girl at the gate.
Yeah, yeah, you could say like Casablanca or something.
Oh yeah.
It's a weird thing. I think of it as more like it's strange because these dreams are also kind of like real. That's another thing about Tom's dreams is that they're real, and the background is that they're kind of they're satanic. They're not just dreams; they're basically reality too. He's in a different world too, like the unifactor. Like what Jim Swindler would say.
Tom, is he struggling with trauma from his college years?
Yes, he is. He's that's a major important theme of the book. He's struggling with his, what he's had, what the past. He just graduated college. He's been a year off, and luckily he was able to meet Daisy and doing fun stuff now and throwing that behind. But his torment in being his years of college, forced to be at some kind of private, college, and it's like going to war, and it's a bad thing. Especially with the whole cultural Marxist brainwashing, you can't get out of that. And Tom's seen a lot of bad stuff, and it's not really mentioned in the book, but some of it is, and his dreams reveal a lot of it. A lot of crypto messages from his dreams, like the airport and stuff, you can kind of reveal as the reader yourself and understand why he feels these things. But once again, I said not only that these are bad dreams, there's this weird science fiction element where his dreams have became a reality, and basically his dreams are they become real, and what he dreams is going to affect the Earth. And this is the Philip K. Dick Valis part comes in. It's a very Dickian kind of theory at this point.
What was those? There was also like a reference to Elliot Rodgers in the book. Was that about Tom or the Howard?
I think it's Tom again. I mean, Tom could be, or that they could have kids like Elliot Rodger,
Oh, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah, talking to Daisy, or it's like, oh, if we have half of kids, they're probably going to be like Elliot Rodgers. Hopefully you have girls because they're going to be hot and every guys want them.
Oh, yeah.
That's when they're on.
And then there's also the reference because they're in Santa Barbara, too.
Yeah, Santa Barbara. Yeah, it's everything fits together. And like when Tom's driving in Santa Barbara, two hot Asian girls are, looking at each other and being like, oh, look, there's a guy with there's an Asian male, white female. There's a white guy double dating with their waffles, It becomes exciting when you start to connect with a greater culture, right? White nationalists constantly talk about getting in roots, in touch with yourself, right? Find your own white identity. Well, for, Asian Americans, or at least this like white male, Asian female, Asian male, white female, you're getting in connection with this whole pan-Asian American thing, right? And you get excited because you realize that there are people like yourself. And so I guess I use Santa Barbara as also that breeding ground of the whole waffle thing going on, right? The Asian Aryan
Why
thing.
did you pick Santa Barbara? Why not like a major city like LA or San Francisco?
I mean, it's a place in California, you could say that, and it's a Calexid. Could happen, right? The country could be separated from every other else in America, and it's really closer to Japan, and it's probably one of the most biggest economies in America, and so most Asians would go there just to be successful with that, right? And I guess it has created that little Asian space in California, right?
There's a decent number of it. There's definitely a lot of Asians that use CSB, but I think of Asians being more in the Bay Area and definitely parts of LA. Santa Barbara, is actually fairly a small town.
Well, I guess that's the. I also mentioned too there are blonde Jewish women across the street. There are some exotic.
Oh, yeah.
Howard points that out, so it's not just exclusively. It's this ideal that California is this very exotic, multicultural place of these wealthy people and all different backgrounds coming through. From Johnny's Clams to a Thai food restaurant to go sit out, right next to the beach,
Oh, let's see. And then you also write about the desert and Arizona on the road trip.
Yeah, the kind of not exactly Route 66, but the really desolate, boring pit stop. You're going to die if your car breaks down, and every mile is a telephone booth kind of road. And it's very scenic, especially if you're in your car and you keep driving. And I do mention that as this kind of deadly thing, That's another scene.
Yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about, because if you drive back, like between LA and Las Vegas, and you're driving through the Mojave Desert, and you go by these little pit stops in the middle of nowhere, but then you see the kind of the sunset in the desert and the mountains in the distance. It can be a magical experience. So then they have this romantic experience out in the desert. Then they're teasing each other in the car. where they stop at all these like weird like pit stops in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere.
like Rodman, the venue in Chapter 3, it's kind of this very strange, weirdo place, right? And then going to a hotel, it's like, okay, it's civilization, Santa Barbara, the beach. Then they go back, and they actually go to another pit stop, and then Las Vegas, right? And so,
Oh, they do go to Las Vegas.
for
Is
only
that
a bit. For only a bit.
just briefly?
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
It's only just a venue that Tom speaks about with his comedy and really tries to make all his traumas into another comical, a joke, right? It's all this surreal stuff going on, and he's just trying to go with it and tell other people about it, and it really becomes this funny Asian Nazi stand-up thing, right? It's this very strange Tom Green-esque funny stuff, very surreal.
There's a scene where Tom is at the ATM and he's doing the kind of a OCD check, and it's funny you mention that because that's something that I do. And whenever I go to an ATM, I always like push the clear and cancel button multiple times. But I don't think I ever told you that.
I do it too. I mean, I'm afraid if my card's gonna get stripped or like a debit guy's. Don't ever use your debit. I mean, you use your debit card sometimes, but like feels like you could get stripped anytime you put an ATM. And it feels like if I press cancel, it'll go away, and it's fun to do that. Actually, it's a common thing most people do.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people do it. Maybe some people are more discreet about it. I mean, it's OCD, but there are definitely legitimate concerns about the next person like accessing your information.
Yeah, I mean that whole first scene where it's just this weird existential Napoleon Dynamite, odd. What's the word? It's just like being in a gas station. There's like the boring Mexican guy, and then it's like you hear Information Society, right? Some old band from.
I like that song.
I like that song too. I love Pure Energy. I love Information Society. But it's this ideal that's an awkward place, It could be anything. It could be like that, Heaven is a Place on Earth being played, and it's just awkward. You're out in the middle of nowhere, right? It's this funny...
that song, you know what that song makes me think of?
Yeah, Elliot Rodgers. What's the word for it? I'm trying to think of the word.
Because there is a video actually of him listening to that song and watching the sunset in Santa Barbara.
When I think of that song, I think of being at Burger King at dinner time, and that song came on, and it's like, what is the song supposed to be telling me? It's supposed to be Burger King is a place on Earth? Am I supposed to be happy eating my food?
I actually remember when I first moved to Santa Barbara, there was this 80s station, and I think it's defunct now, but they must have bought the copyrights to that song, so they were constantly playing it. So I would drive around Santa Barbara, that song would come on.
Yeah, it's a very absurdist thing. Being in it's very scenic, right? It's this. I think that's what makes it interesting too. Trip. It's like this. They're characters on a stage, and we're watching them do things at the reader's expense, and the reader's like, "What?" And it becomes fun, and the reader's just like gets lost in it. So
and then they also make like racial slurs like between Tom and Daisy, and they're talking about different ethnic groups.
Well, yeah, both of them relate because they both don't like niggers, right? They both don't like black people, and they don't think of the Mexicans either. They don't think, and it's funny because they're in a place where it's like Mexicans and blacks could be in a. But it's like it's funny where two other groups, white, the supposedly oppressors, and the Asians, the mild minority, are basically holding hands together, and they both reveal, yeah, I don't like those blackies or there's Mexicans too, and they're finding this harmonious thing with each other. And you think that's so shocking at first because it's how could an Asian be on the side of the evil white man? And it becomes this. It's once again, it's this Asian Aryan thing. It's this don't give.
Well, there's this
mentality.
notion of this kind of SJW Rainbow Coalition, like intersectionality of all the oppressed groups against like cisgender white males, and I guess Asians are trying to. I mean, I think Asians struggle to get into that identity politics because they're well off and they don't have as strong of a victim story as say blacks, but you do see like an Asian SJW movement.
Yeah,
especially among the women and the feminists.
but it's kind of futile because all the yellow feminists really want are just white boyfriends, and and the Asian male. I think the Asian males have it hard. They should all be reading Yukio Mishima or just going to the gym and lifting weights, and they should stop playing StarCraft and being like the typical fat Korean, that just is aloof. They got to do other things, right? And I think the Asian male could be the cataclysm and pinnacle of arts and fun stuff like that. But it's they don't have a light right now because their Asian woman is just so loved in society. It's just, but they produce Asian women, and so a good patriarchy means like a good leadership. And so I think Asian men and white guys, could get along too. And I'll be all for white male, Asian male, gay coupling too. It's an aesthetically pleasing thing.
Personally engaged in that?
I'm gonna. That's off the topic, but
Okay.
maybe I'll just flirt with it. Yeah. But I said yaoi is a very. I'm saying yaoi is a very aesthetically pleasing thing.
Is there a reference to yaoi in the book?
Not really, but I think it's good to have a male aesthetic, and that it's good to have a mannerbun, and you want bond between men. You don't want this like hatred of other guys. You want to belong, just like in a Christian church, right? And so I don't. There has to be less hostility of men. There has to be more of a union and collective between men. The same with women. The same with understanding you're a dad, you're a mom, parents, and children. It's a part of family and a part of culture.
Trip literature, going like Jack Kerouac, but then there's the whole genre of like road trip films.
What's that?
There's the genre of, like road trip literature, going back to like Jack Kerouac. Whole genre of road trip films. They seem to be popular in the 80s, especially.
There is this fascination in the 50s, with Kerouac about, being on the road and that you're free to do what you want and you're going on an adventure, right? This, the same in the 90s and 80s, or, the 90s, there was the anarchist, crime think. They would say, I'm a squatter punk and I get to listen to hardcore all the time and go on this adventure and I don't have to live in mom and dad's basement and do these things. But my argument is, if you do those things, you're a part of the upper class. You are this because somebody's paying you to do those things, right? And so, but there is this.
I mean, unless I guess no one really hitchhikes anymore. I know. I mean, Harlan Venison wrote his book about his journeys on a rail across the country. But for the most part, if you want to take a road trip, you have to have a decent amount of money.
Yeah, I do mention that Tom and Daisy, same with Nancy, they all come from wealthy families and they all got the money. They all are trust fund babies and they can do those things, right? It's just the truth, right? You can't be like ghetto and just go on like a ghetto rap nomad thing. Expect, then you're just some crack whore, right? You have to have money to do. It's a very interesting fantasized thing. Young people always dream about going on these events or these adventures. It's the thrill why people join the Antifa, right? They think they're going against the man or some evil oppressive power, when it's just like, no, it's the sin. It's the ideal. You are a character in an adventure novel and you're overthrowing something bigger. And people,
yeah,
people like that.
I mean, the whole Antifa thing is bullshit, but people just have this urge to be part of something. And it's a way to be part of something that's within the sort of a normie narrative.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's a little normie. Everybody's a little. I don't know about me being normie. I think I'm a different class or culture of people. That's why I like to think of myself. I think as we're back on the whole adventure literature thing.
Well, there's the sort of concept of a sense of place in an adventure novel, and I mean, I'm writing a novel as well, and I've seen plays, and there's plays and books where the entire book is about dialogue between people in one location. I don't know, I mean, some people can appreciate that, but I'm the kind of person, if I watch a film, a play, or read a novel, like there has to be some kind of exploration of space. Location is very important to me.
Oh yeah, I think that's important too. I think Trip is a West Coast thing. Like East Coasters, East Coast having fun on the West Coast.
What is ironic is you're from the East Coast and you're writing a West Coast novel about California and Arizona, and I'm from California and I've never been to the East Coast, but my novel is set in New York City and also Greenwich, Connecticut.
It's the ideal that you're on a tropical island, that you're away from. There's so many things you hear from the West Coast. In fact, all the arts, all the music, everything is from the West Coast, and everyone kind of dreams of going to California and making it big in some way. It's a way. It's the same way a weeb wants to go to Japan and find himself a Japanese wife. He's in love with this ideal that he can transform himself and be something more greater. You move from bumfuck Montana and go somewhere, right? And I'm kind of pessimistic on that. I think everybody's doomed to their own places, and it takes a lot of fighting to get over that bumfuckery. Right? It takes a lot to establish oneself. But the truth is, if you want to be successful, you have to move close to any of those liberal cities like New York City or Los Angeles. It's just a part of truth and a part of business. You can't just be bumfuck Montana and just do whatever. I mean, funny we're talking about this, and Richard Spencer has something in Whitefish, Montana.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the whole sort of movement that Richard Spencer is promoting. It's more. I understand where he's coming from because it's easier to seize power in a small, isolated geographic location. But I also think there's something kind of a little bit defeatist or withdrawing yourself. I mean, I think people do need to be active in countercultures where the major centers of cultural influence and power are.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a part of the socioeconomics. I mean, it's something, whatever, but, you just can't, I'm very pessimistic on it. You just got to adapt to that, It's a lot of lies, a lot of, being back on the whole racial thing, a lot of white guys out of nowhere marrying Chinese wives is because it's a socioeconomic thing. It's better to be a part of a gene family, this ideal that you're climbing the stats to go up. I mean, some would say you're going down because you're losing against the Chinese. It's this ideal that, people are the same way of going in a Jewish family. You're social statusing up. It's this weird thing. I think it all depends about whether you have or stabilize your white identity in favor of that to happen and stable that, and create something on your own community. You can't just be a cuck and be this or new cuck and assume that none of this all matters. You have to be strong, and you have to.
Do you see this whole Asian Aryan scene coming more out of the Swibble culture? People who are relatively affluent, the people you kind of tend to associate with supporting mainstream politics, or do you think it's accessible to, say, someone from a working class background or someone are the kind of people with more right wing politics?
I'm really talking about upper middle and upper classes into Asian Aryanism, and I know the upper classes are decadent and terrible, but I would love for it to be middle and lower classes, and I am seeing that in the middle and lower classes. In middle class environments, I will see the occasional white male, Asian female all the time.
Or they do it. I noticed the working class guys, they'll do it with more the Southeast Asians, Filipinos.
That's exactly right.
That's what I see going on.
Yeah,
that's kind of a poor. I guess you can call it a poor man's Asian Aryanism.
I'm all for poor man's Asian Aryanism. I'm all for that. They just have to be very stable. I love the ideal of middle class Asian Aryanism, hot, hood, Asian girls that want to be black, right? I don't know what that's called.
Oh, Ganguru, is that what it is?
Maybe, yeah. I'm also talking about the Americanized one, an Asian girl who thinks she's black because she's been in the black lower middle classes but has a white boyfriend. I just think that's amazing. I love that. And, that's going to happen more in the middle classes, and I think that should be kind of but most of the time it's really hard because the middle class, they're going to point that out if you have an Asian wife in the middle class. You're what are you, fucking retarded? You have some fucking problem issues marrying this little chink girl? Like, right, that's what they're gonna do if they find. But if you're in like upper middle or upper class, they don't care. Everyone's kind of a sissy nerd and into delicate, precious fine arts, right? And so, yeah, Asianarianism has to be in all the classes. Right now, what's happening in the upper classes, but I hope it'll trickle down slowly onto the lower classes and become that. And I am really writing from an upper middle class point of view. I understand that, but that's where all the culture is happening right now. It needs to, but once it happens in the middle class, I'll love to write more about that and write more about that kind of. I love the ideal of like a middle class white who like wants to learn Japanese or is in Buddhism and he has like a verbally abusive dad and like a divorced mom, right?
Or
and,
you do have those working class guys who go to the military and like meet an Asian wife in the military.
Yeah. I love this ideal where it's like this like middle class, like damaged white kid, like kind of like Eminem, right? And he's like, okay, he could marry like the fat white New Jersey whore. It's like, but he doesn't want to because he knows how disgusting some of like the white trash culture is, and so he kind of escapes through like bumfuck anime and like kind of, he might have some problems, right? But he wants to go above that, and he needs the right direction, right? You could say the anime right is filled with those people, and they just haven't like. The light bulb hasn't hatched yet to assume Asianarianism is the light. They, because it's a socioeconomics again, and it's also really hard to find an Asian woman if you're in the middle classes. It's a fantasy, and they have to be very aggressive in order to, they can't just be this hillbilly whatever. They gotta have class. They gotta self-improve, right? But I love this ideal of this like middle class, lower class kid trying to, become this Asianarian thing.
What do you see yourself and your writings in this novella and your other book as part of a new subculture or counterculture?
Hopefully so. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hopefully wanting to happen. I mean, I am self-publishing these books, and hopefully I'll self-publish many other pulps along with it. And eventually, hopefully, maybe a big other label out there will recognize me, and because I don't think I'm just going to get assigned a label. Here's the red carpet. Put me on your label because I'm strange. No, I want to have some work out there, especially in books, and get more of these books out there, these pulp books. And it's kind of the way that like Jonathan Bowden did with his whole strange-o weirdo books on Lulu. I'm doing the same thing. I'm in that same tradition of just speaking online, getting these books out. Hopefully writing more articles for Asianarianism.com and just like getting this stuff out there, and hopefully we'll give the light. There already been Jennifer Suzuki with Confessions of a Submissive East Asian Woman, that troll writer that basically predated. I coined Asianarianism from them. It is this thing that's happening among this weird disgruntled, and it needs to have the definition, right? There are already people who use the word health goth by Macintosh Plus. Like that scene is basically it's basically like Asianarianism. It's just this thing people made up. It's an internet meme. It's like C-punk, right? It's playful. It can work like Asianarianism. People are kind of intimidated because it's not like twee enough. Because Arianism means like you're a skinhead, you're tough. Yeah, it's true. You might be.
Well, one side says you're racist, and the other side says you're implementing the clergy plan.
Yeah, but that's not true. None of those are true at all. It's more like an alt-left thing. It's this new avant-garde thing where people got to open their mind and consider other things they haven't considered before. That's what the artist does. The artist introduces the normie to new concepts, and normie is tortured by that because he has to pinhole the artist. And that's why artists never have audiences. That's why somebody tells you, oh, you don't have an audience to this book. It's not going to sell. Well, because the audience sucks. Like that Realicide song. The audience sucks. And basically, people gravitate to other friends, and an audience is naturally built. Plant them and they will come, or whatever, from that like cheesy baseball movie. But
I think there is like a new audience emerging.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very new phenomenon, but I'm starting to see it.
That's exactly how the alt-right formed. Everyone laughed at the alt-right. Where are you trying to get neo-Nazis? They don't even like you too, and now it's here, right? As long as you plant your seeds, give it some time, the weirdos are going to come, right? The juggalos, right? Who would think like juggalos, like wrestle? You're from Detroit, you like wrestling, you paint your face, you listen to rap music and you're white. No one would think Juggalos was happening. And now here's the Juggalo thing, and they all drink Faygo, and they're serial killer clowns, and they meet in the Midwest every year, right? That's so. What has happened, right? What part of my...
So yeah, Asian could be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really influenced from the aesthetic of Atari Teenage Riot's digital hardcore. I love, Juju. I love what they're doing. I love...
You referenced Juju in the book, I think.
Yeah, in a stand-up. We're making fun of him, so... But,
Well, there is, remember the previous... let's see. Before I wrap up the show, is there anything else you'd like to add about the book?
I'd like to also say that the book is very supernatural because Tom's dreams are quite real, and there's this very big science fiction fantasy element to it where it becomes a prophecy that Asian Aryanism will become real, and because what he is doing will affect the world, and it becomes this thing he's not in control of, and Tom is also a messiah. It seems like this fun book of just young kids until it realized that the turning point and climax of the novel is that he is going to become this future messiah, and his traumas are going to reinvent the world. And
I think you're borrowing stuff from my novel.
No, I don't. No, I've never borrowed anything from your goddamn novel. I clearly made this up on my own.
Yeah, well, maybe that's like a universal theme in literature. I don't know. No one has complete ownership to it. That's always been kind of this theme of like the main character who he sees himself as some kind of messiah, and then his visions become implemented.
Yeah, Dune, or like...
Yeah.
I was thinking more like Monkey Bone. I really like Monkey Bone, and that's about a cartoonist, and he gets in his dream world, and his cartoon, everything's like clay animated, and then his Monkey Bone becomes out of his reality, and he becomes... That's cool. I really liked that theme in Monkey Bone, and I don't know, maybe there's that theme of Monkey Bone in Trip. You could see it that way. And that
there definitely is. In my novel, is there any... you've read basically the rough draft of my novel. Is there any references to race play?
Yeah, didn't I write the whole race play naked orgy scene in that? I wrote a couple of orgy scenes and Peter Sotos-esque retardation in that. And
do you want to give like a little hint to our audience, just a little teaser?
Well, it's the main character who's a virgin is basically tortured by 7 different women, or like 10 different women of different races, and it all becomes like, oh, she's Asian, so she's got fish pussy, right? Or sideways vagina, sideways fire vagina, right?
Something like that.
But yeah, it's playful. But the whole prophetic thing is just it's just a surrealist thing. I think it's a very common thing you see in books, and it definitely has very something of a trip. I will say that it is a trip also into the afterlife. It's the back thing with the whole Cause and Effect album, right? The Cause and Effect's Trip album was dedicated to Sean, who unfortunately died on the first album, and he's in the afterlife, right? And it's the Trip. It's dedicated also to Cause and Effect, so...
There's a reference in the book to like something like satanic. What was that in reference to?
There's a lot of satanic references. You could, well... I do say... let me think. There's a lot of references to a lot of different things. And, I don't know which part, but when I say satanic stuff, I clearly write it down, so...
We are at the end of the show. I would like to thank Pilleater for being on. Go check out his new novella, Trip.
Awesome, guys. Go to the Ululu link and please buy it. I love that support. Thank you.